you're probably looking to make 65 to 85 cents on the dollar when you acquire that customer. And then basically, your product has to do the work of bringing somebody back.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Perfectly Mentored. I'm your host, Jason Portnoy. My guest today is Nik Sharma, the CEO of Sharma Brands, a strategic initiatives firm working with a wide range of brands to help grow and scale revenue across digital platforms. Nik is one of Adweek's young and influential Forbes 30 under 30 and an investor and advisor in some of the fastest growing brands in commerce. His work with hyper-growth brands like Hint Water, Pill Club, and Judy has resulted in new strategies, milestones, and millions of dollars in additional revenue for the companies. He has a keen eye for sociological advancements in culture and data-driven mind for what works and what doesn't in a rapidly changing environment. We live in a world where data is abundant, but what to do with that data is where Nik thrives. The balance between research, content, distribution, and unknowns is his juggling act. An absolute pleasure. Nik, my man, what's going on? Welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Jason.
No, every time I read a bio for a guest, it's always, I love reading it, but I feel like we could get a lot more by you going a little bit deeper in your journey. Like, how'd that entrepreneurial path get started for you? How'd you become the go-to for some of these brands?
To be honest, I have no idea. It basically, I've always loved just building things, whether it's Legos or whether it's, when I was a kid, I would sell, if I needed a new bike, I'd take my current bike and go door to door and sell it. If I wanted an iPod, I had to make a PowerPoint presentation. I just loved the entire process behind it, and just loved the concept of building something that, will amount to something even greater in the future. And I think that combined with, just sharing the common things that I see on a daily basis, whether it's on Twitter, on LinkedIn, in an email, over SMS to my community. I think just the combination of those two things has kind of led me to be that go-to person, but it was never intentional. I mean, even today, when I think through the stuff I put out, it's never intentional. I'll have a conversation with an executive at, a place like Ramoa, or a conversation with an executive at a D2C brand. And I'll be like, oh, that's an interesting thing that I think a lot of people would benefit from if I put it out. And then I would just put it out.
In your bio, you wrote, and I read, you have a keen eye for sociological advancements in culture and a data-driven mind. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means, and maybe go deeper about how the listeners could become better at developing that too? Because I think it's super important in growing any sort of brand or understanding what's going on in culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just being able to look at how people interact with things, whether they're objects, whether they're other people, whether they're, even brands, media companies, like seeing how people react to different things, and then being able to adjust, the things that you might be running, whether it's a marketing strategy, a content playbook, whatever it may be. Or it could just be something simple, like a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, David Perel. He always loves to share this story of how, we went to we both got invited to an event that Front Office Sports had hosted. And David and I were able to sneak in, without paying a pretty hefty price tag to get in. So it was really a room of like heavy hitters. And, we were in the back of the room. We were a free ticket, so I didn't really want to take up the seats for people who paid, a couple thousand. But, one thing David always mentions is like when we were in the back of the room, I was just hunting on Twitter for everybody who was in that room, and then trying to set up little 5-minute, like, you want to grab a coffee real quick, or, just being able to basically, I think it's the concept of like understanding how people see things, react to things, and then being able to use it for your own advantage.
So go a bit deeper than that, if you don't mind, a little bit more tactical. For the listeners listening, is it just as simple of, if you're going to be at a conference or you're going to be networking, look up the attendees there that are going to be there, get a little bit of information, and then use that as a conversation opener?
Yeah, I mean, for that one specifically, it was, Front Office Sports had a hashtag to their event, and it was just searching everybody who was liking, retweeting, uh, anything with that hashtag, replying to those, tweets with those hashtags, even tweeting the tweets with those hashtags. And I made a few cool friends over there that I still chat with today. But it was basically just like looking at people who are engaging, and then because I knew that I had a blue check on Twitter, I know that if I jump in and DM them or send them a tweet, like it's going to pop up on their phone. And so basically seeing that and taking advantage of it. But it could be used in other ways. It could be for example, like back when I was in ad tech sales, I remember closing an ad tech deal by not finding somebody, but the person I was trying to close a deal with, wouldn't respond on email. So I ended up finding him on Snapchat, and that's how I ended up closing the deal. It's just like figuring out like the little workarounds when you can, finding those paths less taken, and almost just taking advantage of them because nobody else is doing it.
I love it. And that's kind of what I love about Twitter, right? Especially for this podcast or reaching out to people that I would never get in contact with. They may have 3 million followers on Instagram and be very active there, but they probably have like maybe 100,000 or 10,000 followers on Twitter. They're going to see your message a little bit more.
Totally.
So you're a numbers driven guy. I'm a numbers driven guy. I like that as well, especially for our agency. We live in a world where media buyers love to post beautiful screenshots with zero context, of their beautiful ROAS column. I can tell you that most businesses I speak to, I don't know about you, have no clue what their numbers really are, have no clue what ROAS they need in order to scale. What's your take on the DTC world, the direct to consumer world right now, and the need for immediate profitability or the immediate returns?
Well, on the first point of the screenshots, I think it's a joke. There's a few people who post screenshots and then they explain the context, like David Herman, a great example of that. Every time he posts a screenshot, there's always great context behind it. And also he's just an OG. But then there's, Taylor did like a funny tweet that was, Taylor Sicard, that just made fun of it, where he made like a blank Shopify dashboard with 100 million in revenue. He's like, buy my course. But it's there's like no context. You can't really trust it. And also, I forget who I was talking to yesterday, but basically anytime somebody is very vocal about their numbers or their CPAs or whatever, they're usually false, or they're usually like saying it in a way to compete or because they feel like they have to compete. I've never met somebody who's actually killing it, bragging about it, because why would you? It makes no sense. But in terms of profitability, I think it depends on the type of business, right? If you're a consumables business or a subscription focused business, you're probably not looking to be profitable on the first purchase. You're probably looking to break even or not lose that much. I always say, like, a good example is, if you're a beverage brand that's a good beverage brand, you're probably looking to make 65 to 85 cents on the dollar when you acquire that customer. And then basically, your product has to do the work of bringing somebody back. And obviously you have, remarketing campaigns and email and CRM, SMS, programmatic, like you have all these channels, but the real stickiness comes, especially in high consumption products, when the product itself is really good. It doesn't come from just acquiring a customer and then running a remarketing camp. Like, you can't guarantee it. And so, I think in those businesses, it's a different case. Even if you look at like Hubble Contacts, right? If you're getting somebody into a contact lens subscription, like at some point you can't really just say you don't need it anymore unless you're making a big change. So, they can afford to, on the first purchase, lose money because they know that, for the next 8 months that customer is going to be with them. But if you're something like, Caraway, which is cookware, or you're something like, even Italic, which focuses, they make their money on a membership, not on the products they sell, or even Judy, you have to be profitable on the first purchase. There's no exception. The only exception is, if you're running like a brand marketing focused campaign and there are no KPIs to hit, customer acquisition costs. It's basically to drive brand awareness. But other than that, not aiming for profitability on the first purchase is like driving a car backwards, and you just don't do it.
But then how important is like customer lifetime value when you strategize with a client and chat, acquisition costs?
Well, I think it's definitely important. I think for a long time it was kind of this. It was almost like a fallback, right? It was like, oh yeah, we can spend $100 to acquire this customer who's going to buy our product for $30 because we think that they're gonna, if they're buying our hand cream, that they're gonna come back and buy it 5 more times. But it's just never that simple, and oftentimes it rarely ever pans out, right? That's why you have companies like Casper that'll light up a $99 light bulb, which probably costed them $4 to produce, because they have to figure out, okay, if somebody spent $1,000, how do we extend the lifetime value? Because shit, nobody's gonna come. Why would somebody come back and buy something from us, if we already sold them a mattress and spent a lot more to give it to them? So I think obviously lifetime value is important. I think I would probably bet on it more if it was something that was actually proven, not just articulated or thought out on an Excel sheet. Or if you just have an insane product, like Hint Water is such a good example of that, where the product stickiness is there and the retention is there because of the product, not because of a marketing tactic or a financial plan, right? It's because the product is actually good.
And I think that's one of the biggest assumptions we have to make, right? We're assuming that if you're going to compete in this world, you have to have a good product, you have to have good service, you have to have good customer service. Without those, you're dead in the water anyways. Yeah. But to break through that noise, right? Because it's a noisy world out there, and especially in the beverage world or the mattress world, whatever it is, there has to be some sort of cost attributed to that. I find it super hard to be profitable right out of the gate.
Yeah, it is, but I think that's what separates, businesses that last from the ones that are maybe side projects or hobbies. Like, I think if it's if it's a business, in my opinion, if you're launching a business today, you have to figure out what your moat is at launch, right? You can't unless you're like launching some kind of I don't know, something ridiculous, like 23andMe might be in that kind of ridiculous category, but something where you're basically developing technology that's never seen the light of day before. Unless you're doing that, you have to figure out what is your advantage over everybody else probably doing it. I mean, I can't even tell you how many pitches of skincare I get in my email a day. And then B, also like the massive companies that have been around for years, the SC Johnsons, the Procter & Gamble's, the Unilevers, the Johnson & Johnsons of the world. Like, those are two players that you have to always kind of have on your radar. And if you don't have some kind of advantage or moat in the beginning to get to your first 10 million in revenue, which is where you could say that you have like a solid business, you have revenue, you have customers, you have distribution, then you probably, if you don't have the moat to get there, then you probably shouldn't launch. It's just not worth it. And those moats can be within, a celebrity founder. They can be within a retail relationship that gets you instant access to distribution. They can be in the fact that your margins are so high that you can outspend competitors in customer acquisition. They can be in financial engineering, where you actually sell products and make your money, and then you pay for the inventory that you just sold to the customer. Like, there's a lot of ways to see it, but unless you have some kind of moat, it's really hard to build a business, because I mean, it's not like you can launch the 77th direct-to-consumer skincare brand and hit a customer in a whole new way. You have to basically one, you have to hit them in a new way. You have to figure out how to do that. But two, you have to have something on the back end that helps you get there, or that helps you kind of justify whether it's the cost of doing it or the time it takes or the distribution you can trump to get there. There's certain things that you have to have in place. Otherwise, it's tough. It's really tough.
You mean the skincare that's going to pitch you their secret formula or their new vitamin that's inside of it is not enough?
Yeah. And the crazy thing too is like, a lot of these skincare brands come from the same factories. So it's literally one product with 75 different labels.
But this one's made with love, right?
Right. Made with love and care.
Yeah. So when you're consulting with a lot of these brands, what are some of the beliefs that you have to counter or change the most? Like, what are some of the common myths or thoughts that they come to you with and you're like, no?
Well, I mean, the funniest one is like whenever we work on launching brands, the myth or the idea that the brand book is the Bible is like so wrong. The brand book is good for your design, your color, aesthetics, basically anything on the design and display side. But from a messaging standpoint, from a copy, from a content pillars, anything there, it's usually almost never right. And that's because, most branding agencies don't really put together brands with data. They almost put it together with, whether it's group sessions or just ideating in a conference room. We're working with the telemedicine brand right now, basically guiding them through, kind of being their co-pilot to guide them through the branding process. And we're running so many tests on the back end around copy, creative, messaging, even just colors, call to actions, understanding audience demographics. So when this brand book comes out, it's going to be pretty rock solid. But I think the biggest one is that the brand book is the Bible. And then I think the other one too is that like if we build a good product, people are going to come and find us, and that's just like it's so backwards. You have to build a good product, obviously, like that's a no-brainer, but it has to be through the lens of distribution. So how do you get a product to somebody? Like let's take skincare for example.
We're picking on skincare too much.
Yeah. Lumen Skin actually, I would say, did a fantastic job with it, right? They are probably the largest D2C skincare business for men, at least. They found that with really smart landing pages and with really good offers to get somebody in the door, kind of like how Curology did, they could basically keep a customer for a pretty long time. And that was something that they discovered that nobody else had. And so that's almost like, have a good product, but then through the lens of distribution, they created this free trial program that brought customers in, and it ended up netting out for them. But it has to be through the lens of distribution. It has to be like, how do I get somebody wanting to commit to this, not me trying to convince them to commit to this? And that's the solve.
I agree. It's funny you talked about the branding. I still remember one of my first clients that came to us and we used the wrong color blue on one of their Instagram posts, and we got like a really, really harsh email saying, you used the wrong color blue. This is not our brand. They have zero in sales, Nick. So my response was, I remember we had a conference and I went in and they brought it up again. I'm like, with all due respect, you don't have a brand color. Right? Like you have zero sales. What if the pink gets you 1 million sales? You're prepared to like forego that $1 million because it's not the blue, it's a pink, right? So I love what you said about the data there. I would add one of the most other common myths that they come to us with is that the value ends after the transaction. I feel like so many of these brands don't understand the post-purchase or the white glove service you need to provide after the purchase.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How important is that for you and the brands that you work with?
Super important. I mean, usually one of the first things we do is light up email, CRM, whether it's just standard flows or whether it's adding in new things. I mean, you also have to understand that not everybody wants to be spoken to and white glove serviced after purchasing something. Maybe they just want to come there and buy, whatever they want to buy, and then they're like, all right, I'm done. But there are people, and that's kind of where it's really important to look at the numbers and also figure out, all right, this pool of customers has, let's just say, for example, this pool of customers has opened 2 of our post-purchase emails. We're going to actually put them in a whole new segment of like fans. Oh, they opened four emails post-purchase. Those become super fans. And then understanding how to treat those segments of customers differently, because you can bet that depending on those buckets, you're going to see different AOVs and different lifetime values over the course of, probably the next 12 to 18 months. But yeah, I mean, it's super important. There's so many things that you learn out of it, whether it's like understanding what buckets to put them in, or just understanding, you might just be completely missing the mark on your messaging in the first place. And a lot of times that comes learned through, customers after they've tried the products, and then you hear their reviews or their feedback or complaints.
Yeah, I love so underused segmenting your email list, right?
Yeah.
So many people don't. How important is brand building though, right? The importance of building a brand, or even more than that, your own platform. How important is it for people? You talked about how important it was for you, right? That blue check mark, even to just start opening conversations. How important is it for people, services, or businesses to be that omnipresent or in a position to dominate their market?
I'm actually not 100% sure it's super important. I think, if you look at Caraway, for example, it's nearly impossible to find Jordan's social profile on the internet. But Caraway is an insanely fast growing business. It's dominating its market. And, what they did really well was they just understood positioning and distribution really, really well, like probably better than the other cookware brands. But, Jordan doesn't have a platform. I don't think really anybody on the Caraway team has a social presence or a personal brand. I think for me, it was almost just accidental too. It was never intentional. It was just like, oh, that's a cool thought. Let me put it out. And then all of a sudden I found myself on this D2C Twitter. But I don't think it's crazy important. I think obviously, relationships are probably the thing that matter the most, especially as a founder. That helps you in things like recruiting, fundraising, finding manufacturers, getting in touch with influencers, fulfillment partners, like whatever it is. Personal brand or social media is just like those relationships, just times 10, I think.
It's funny because like I look at you and what you put out there, and just for the purpose of this conversation, and well, I happen to disagree with you. I think it's super important. I think if no one knows you exist, it's kind of hard to do business with you, right? I'm not saying the founder has to have a social presence. I think the brand needs to be somewhere out there in order to crush it, right? I wasn't talking about that. I was talking more like if you don't put your product or your service, or if you're selling yourself or whatever it is, in a position to get in front of people, it is very, very, very hard. Mm-hmm. And I just see with what's going on right now, so many people have been able to build brands based off their social media presence. Look at it doesn't have to be, Dennis on Twitter put out that tweet. I don't know if you saw it the other day, where he said how many people have built their brands on the back of a personal brand. Yeah. There are plenty, maybe they're not $100 million brands, but there are plenty of people who are able to grow successfully because they put themselves out there to people.
Totally.
And I think what you do is incredible, right? It's almost like the mindset, the more hands you shake, the more money you make. The more you're out there, the more you're putting yourself out there, the more you're becoming that authority in the DTC space, and you're getting on podcasts and you're getting all these tweets. It puts you in a position where now more clients want to work with you.
Totally. Yeah.
So then what's your strategy when you talk with brands and you consult brands to dominate their market? Tell me what the perfect Nik Sharma blueprint to success looks like.
Well, we only work with a very, very small percentage of brands that we talk to. We're a small team. We're probably 10 or 12 people. We act as a growth partner where we don't do media buying, but we do everything else. We do landing pages, creative, design, development, basically anything on the growth side. And also our goal is to basically come in and work with a brand for 3 to 6 months and really help them figure a lot of things out. And then we're done, right? So our goal is get in for 3 to 6 months, and then hopefully the media agency stays on. Maybe there's a CRM team we bring on that they stay on, and but then we drop off. And for us, it's a combination of a couple things. One is that I don't want to be in the agency business forever, and so it's selfishly, I'm thinking, what are the best brands for me to get on a case study until I want to get out of this business. So I can say that, we worked on these brands and everybody's like, oh, I know all these brands. That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
And then the second thing is are they actually products that we use personally and that we would use in our own routines or that we personally love? And if they're not, then we usually never take it on because it's really hard. I think one of the things that we do best is we go really deep with these brands, and we are able to go so deep because a lot of times we use these brands in our daily life. So, a good example is there was a cleaning brand that a home cleaning brand we worked with earlier this year. And, they were basically going to shut the business down because it just wasn't, everything they'd tried wasn't working. The price point was insanely high. And they just weren't able to message it in a way that works. Also, they were also just following, the brand book pretty blindly. And, we asked for basically 2 weeks of cover from them to basically say, let us go in and just try a bunch of random things. Nothing's really going to be on brand, but let's see if we can make it work. And about 6 weeks later, they were on track for a 7 million run rate. But it was because we all got shipments on my team of the product, and we used the product, and we were like, whoa, this is an insane product. This is just insane. They're completely missing the mark on messaging because either A, they're following the brand book, or B, they're drinking their own Kool-Aid and they don't really realize the benefits. So then taking that in and understanding, how to message it, how to show it, how to, the different formats of doing it all, whether it be, content based or acquisition based. Basically what I'm trying to say is our perfect brands are ones that actually fit into our daily routines. They're all brands that we would use on a daily basis. And they're all brands that are also in a position to go and grow really fast. So if we say, for example, let's just say, for example, a client comes to us and they say they have $500,000 a month to spend on media. If we find an efficiency on something that has the ability to then spend double or triple that, then that client should just say yes, not, oh, we don't have the cash for it. If they say that, they're not a perfect client for us. But if they say yes, and those are the types of brands that we work well with, because then when we find something, we can really gas it and scale as fast as we can.
So will you not work with anyone who sits there and says, no, we got to follow the brand book? And then you're like, why even come to us then?
Yeah. Because our biggest thing is we're just really good at testing, 73 different things and narrowing it down to the 9 that work really well, and then scaling the shit out of those 9.
Is messaging usually the number one thing that is tweaked and that makes the difference?
Yeah, messaging is always the first thing we look at. I think about it as avenues and cul-de-sacs. So if you think about it, there's let's say you're selling skincare. There could be 75 different reasons why somebody's going to buy that product. And so we start testing all 75. And so that is testing copy, that's testing static, that's testing video creative, that might be testing landing pages, that might be testing listicles, that might be testing, long form pages, it might be testing, influencer videos, UGC, And then there's obviously different offers and price points that we want to test. There's different audiences that we want to test and go after. And so we basically come in and help facilitate all of that testing, so that by the end of the 3 or 6 months, we're like, all right, this is the game plan, and this is what works, and this is what doesn't work, and this is how you scale it up. And then, in a perfect world, we bring on a media team as we get started, so that, by the time we drop off, the media team is like already on a roll. They know things that are going to work and not work, and they can basically help scale.
We should get this podcast sponsored by a skincare company. I think that's going to be the goal.
Black Wolf Nation.
You said something about building the brand, dropping off after 3 to 6 months. So if a listener is thinking about this, right, how do they measure your results, right? Because if you have the media team going and pushing, the media team is going to take credit for a lot of the results that they're pushing.
Yeah.
But where do you come in? Like, what are the KPIs you set with them?
It's always a tough question because, we do act as like a layer on top. The best way to say it is like, you just kind of know it, you feel it, right? Like when you see all the tests running, when you see new learnings come in that are breakthrough learnings, when you see partnerships being formed, when you see even like brand collaborations. I mean, you could take it a step further. For Judy, we launched 2 national TV commercials that we produced and bought the media for. There's just a lot of things that we do that aren't necessarily, on a media dashboard, but they enable much smarter buying, much smarter spending, better ROAS or better ROI. I guess you kind of see it in those spaces. I mean, if, we were looking at a client we worked with that was it is a pretty big household brand. And, looking at their revenue from when we started working with them, it just shot up, and then it kept growing from there. So when you look at the macro of it, it's very easy to see where we came in and what the impact was. But on a micro day-to-day level, it might be a little tougher. But that's where it comes in handy to basically, we have such a great portfolio of things that we've done, that we can basically say is like, this is what we've done.
I'm going to start wrapping it up, but I'm going to give you a question I know you're very opinionated about, and the debate about going to college, right? And the importance of it. And I want you to answer it without giving me the DTC world answer of it depends, right? That's our typical go-to. But I know this scenario you feel very strongly about, so I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I mean, for me, it was very obvious that, I was a horrible student, and the thought of like going to college for me was almost suffocating. But the alternative, the alternative was not go to college, but like, you're going to basically go to college. It's just a different form, right? Like I remember working at an ad tech company, sleeping for, 4 hours a night pretty consistently. And just basically I went to like the school of the real world. But I was committed to it. And so that's why it worked out for me. If I wasn't committed to it, there's no way it would have worked out. I think in general, obviously if you're a doctor, lawyer, whatever, you kind of have to, because you need to. But if you're not, then maybe there's an opportunity to, I hate talking about it because I hate giving the advice. I truly think it really depends on people's situation and also their personality type. For example, my sister went to college. I don't think she would do well without going to college, because she learned so much, she grew so much in the experience of going to college, whether it's the experience of, whether it's the actual knowledge, or whether it's like the street knowledge you get from things like, going out late and missing your first class. Now you fucked up. Okay, you learn how to manage your time better. If you're a student, she was a student athlete and an honor roll student. She learned time management really well, which she wouldn't have learned outside of college.
You should have went to her college. I went to college. I learned none of those skills.
But I think, if it's, I know so many kids today who didn't go to college and ended up doing well. It's obviously a very small percentage of people who don't go to college and are okay. But, if you have the commitment and the drive to do it, and I don't know, the thing I didn't have was a safety net, so I only had one option. And I think if you're in that kind of position, then it might work out because you only have one option.
Look, I think you gave a pretty responsible answer, in the sense that people think entrepreneurship is like watching Shark Tank, right? You go on.
Yeah, well, that's one thing you just can't teach, right?
Yeah,
like I remember touring colleges, and I would always ask about that program. And some colleges had it at the time, most didn't. But it's like, when you come do it, there's really there's no program that can teach you how to be an entrepreneur. I mean, it's so much of it's obviously the fundamental things, learning things like cash flow and fundraising or communication, but it's also like 67 other skills that you'll never learn: stress management, time management, balancing your own personal and professional life, balancing relationships, knowing which relationships to cut, which ones to grow. Like, there's so many things about entrepreneurship you just can't teach.
Yeah, and I blame the leaders in this community also for not making it so clear about just how hard, this line of work is, right? This isn't the easy way out. I think college is the easy way out. I think going to become a lawyer or a doctor is the easy way out. I mean, if you're willing to go to school for that long and do that, I'm not. But the ups and downs, I don't think so many people could handle it. I don't think that there's major swings that people don't talk about, and people just always go on social media and they scroll through and they see the best version of everyone else.
Right.
I think us entrepreneurs, and I'm just throwing us all in, I'm not saying you, but I don't think entrepreneurs in general do enough of a job to show just how hard and windy and roller coaster this type of road is.
Totally. I mean, I wear a Whoop to track, mostly to track my sleep, but it tracks a bunch of stuff.
Yep.
And one of the things it tracks is basically stress. And I can see when I have weeks that my recovery is just completely in the red. And that's because I'm insanely stressed. And then I can see when I come out of it and I have green weeks or yellow weeks. But yeah, no, it's definitely not talked about enough.
And also our line of work right now, which is the cool thing, online marketing, right, is the cool thing to get into. And there's no barrier of entry, right? You want to become a doctor, the well-known doctor, you have to go to medical school. You have to kind of build up your practice. With this, it's any kid with a computer could go say, I'm an online marketer, and then, just flaunt themselves properly in front of a client and take their money and completely mess up. It's a very scary world right now for that community. Totally. I'm going to end with this. With what's going on right now with Apple and Facebook and all the privacy concerns going on, there are two camps, right? There's the camp of run towards the hills. This is all over. We're done. Or there's the old school marketers, the full stack marketers who are like, been there before, seen it. We'll just adapt and go. What are your thoughts on everything going on?
Well, I kind of have two schools of thought. I just got off the phone this morning with Facebook to talk about it, actually. One school of thought is Facebook always figures out a way. There's never been a situation where they don't, and they have to figure out a way because their business depends on it. Their business is primarily advertising. So, when California came up with all these stupid privacy laws, they created the conversions API and integrated with Shopify. So overnight you'd be okay. There's probably, December, January, February, there's probably like 2.5 months of runway right now where Facebook has to come up with something. Right now, they've basically created a bunch of documentation around how to handle it in today's environment. And hopefully I'll put out something that helps a lot of people fix it. But I'm confident that either Facebook's lawsuit against Apple is going to result in something that helps kind of roll this back a little bit to the point where, maybe there's less data being shared, but you can at least track certain metrics. Or I'm confident that Facebook will figure out a way around it. The other school of thought is like, so what? Like, I think that I'm pretty good at understanding changes and then adapting to them. And I think one of the reasons I have been doing well work-wise is because I'm good at adapting to things really fast and figuring out alternatives before other people. And so on the other hand, I'm thinking, okay, well, we'll just figure out a way around it. And, you know, maybe it'll help my business because I'll figure it out faster than other people will.
I mean, go back to like 2012 running Facebook ads to now, right? Like, I wish we could go back to that time period, right? Aside from manually calculating things that weren't on the dashboard, but I wish I could go back where you could just put out a post that says, share this for a chance to win, and just get like thousands and thousands of purchases and shares on it. You know, life was easier. And I think the real marketers, like you said, will find a way and adapt. So what, right? Like just like Facebook finds a way, I think the real marketers find a way. And I think it's going to be a good test for a lot of these online marketers right now if they could keep going.
It'll be the survival of the best for sure.
Good. We always need a good purge.
Yeah, love a good purge.
Love it. Nick, for people who want to reach out to you and find you, how can they find you?
The easiest is actually probably Twitter. I'm just at Mr. Sharma on Twitter. I see every message. I see every notification. I see every tweet. The second easiest is email, n@sharma.com. And the third easiest is texting me, 917-905-2340.
Boom. First guest to ever put out a phone number on here. I love it.
Yeah.
Go hit him up. Go blow him up. Nick, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jason.